Now, there's an interesting way that we can use tables. Remember, I said that tables can basically operate as any data structure that we need in Lua. But there is one way that tables lend themselves to the easiest, which is as an array or a list. By default, if we create a table and we don't specify a key, it's going to use an index for that, which it's going to increment just like an array or a list in a lot of other programming languages. So what we're actually going to do is in our guess our number game, we're going to use a table to store a list of all of the guesses, and we're just going to add to that list every time, and we're going to use a table to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a local variable called guesses, and we're going to set this equal to just an empty table. Now, one other shortcut we could do here is we could pre-populate this. We could put some guesses in here, let's say, and what would happen is that the keys for these would be the indexes starting at 1. In Lua, arrays are indexed with 1, not with 0. This is a point that can be confusing because in many other programming languages, arrays start with 0. So if we did this right here, what we would end up with would be basically a table that would have keys of 1, 2, and 3, and the values would be 15, 20, and 50. This would effectively operate as an array, but an array that we can expand dynamically. In our case, though, we're just going to start with a blank table. And what we're going to do is after we grab an answer, we're going to add to it. So the way that we can add to it, or at least one of the ways, is we can do this. We can say guesses plus 1 equals answer. So what we're doing here is we're basically taking our guesses table, we're indexing into it, we're finding what the length of it is, essentially, how many items are in there right now. We're adding 1, and that's the new index that we're going to use, and then we're adding a new value in here. So this table or array, as we're using it, in this case, is automatically going to expand for us. So this will basically store all of our answers in here. Then what we want to do is print this out. But before we can print this out, we're going to need to return this back because we used a local guesses. Now, we could have used a global variable, but it's still probably cleaner to use a local one. So what we're going to do is we're going to return at the end of this function guesses. So we'll return that table. Then at our handle guesses, we're going to go ahead and create another local variable here called guesses. We're going to set this equal to the return value. Now, you might question and say, well, why create a variable here and here? And you could just use a global variable, like I said, but if you are trying to make this reusable, perhaps you are going to call this from multiple places in your code, and you're using a global variable, you're going to have a problem because every time that you call this, you're going to be overriding that global variable. So it's important to try to use local variables as much as possible so that you don't have that problem. Otherwise, all your code's going to be tangled together, which you do not want. So let's go ahead and print this out. We're going to go ahead and say print, and we're going to say here are your guesses, and then we're going to go ahead and print the guesses. So we're just going to do a for loop. We're going to say for I comma v, and then we're going to do in I pairs this time. And we're going to pass in our table, which is guesses. Then do, we'll put our end, and then all we're going to do is print I comma v. Now in this case, we're using I pair because we want to get the index and the value. So this should print all of our guesses in numerical order. So let's go ahead and give this a try here. We're going to guess our number. We'll guess 50. Okay, that's too high. So how about 25? It's too high. So how about 13? That's too low. So how about 20? Too low. So 23. Too low. 24. That's it. So let's take a look at our output. And you can see here are your guesses. First we said 50, then 25, then 13, then 20, then 23, then 24. A binary searching algorithm, or at least a decent approximation of it. But that's another way to use a table, to use it as an array type. If you don't specify the key, it's basically going to act a lot like an array or a list that can be expanded.